So, a century has passed since Steiner's attempt to bring about the threefold social organism in a healthy, conscious way. Do you know what halted it then and what halts it now?
I think it's a consciousness question. People are not aware today that there even is such a thing. It's a fraction of humanity that's ever even heard the term or thought these thoughts. And then that's not enough. It's also a question of whether they're presented in an adequate way. People get enthusiastic about them and then they pass them on as if it were some kind of program to be implemented, a utopia. Once we've got everything in place and all the votes are secure, we throw the switch and then we have the threefold social organism. It's not a utopia, as Rudolf Steiner, its discoverer and propagator, was insistent upon pointing out. It's a lawfulness which is already there in the world. This spiritual cultural life does not work unless it's free, or only to the extent that it's free. The rights sphere only works to the extent that it's based on equality, and the economic sphere of production, distribution, and consumption only works to the extent that it's based on real practiced brotherhood. Those are realities which are already there now. So we need to get away from thinking that it's an ideal which at some point in the future will be realized, and start to understand that it's an inherent threefold dynamic in the social organism which we can correspond to more or less in everything that we do. The wish for a program as a solution was an impediment in 1919 and 20 and is an impediment today as well. Another impediment is a deep-seated wish to have some authority, a paternalistic government that will take care of our problems. It will make sure we have good housing and good schools and a good economy and good medicine. And that is a throwback to the ancient Egyptian cultural period. I'm sure much has changed, but I think those impediments were operative then and are operative now.
So, to unblock those impediments, individuals need to work on their consciousness.
Yes.
At the individual level, or the social level, or both?
Consciousness always begins with the individual. And once it achieves a critical mass, it forms culture in a free way.
Can it work backwards? Let's say if some individuals lose their innate threefoldedness, could the community bring it back into them?
Yes. To a degree. A favorable society always works favorably upon the individual.
So, for example, if in North America individuals lose their threefolded nature, could a social system bring it back?
Yes, with the caveat that the system is never an impersonal, detached entity, but emerges in turn from the activity of individuals.
Have you perceived any erosion or advancement in the capacities to organize a threefold social organism in the individuals? Are there any differences between Europeans and North Americans in this respect?
It's always risky to generalize, but in my limited experience and awareness, it seems to me that the founding of America, I cannot really speak in the same way about Canada because Canada has a different history. Canada didn't go through a revolution so much as an evolution. But the American colonies, which rebelled against England and became independent, were founded out of a mistrust in the state. When the new nation first began, it was a confederacy of friends. And the first flag, which resembled the present flag of the European Union, was a circle of stars, showing those are 13 independent states. Later, we fell back into centralism, but there is still a greater skepticism toward the centralized government in regard to medicine, schools, religion, and certain other central questions than you find in Europe, where it is more or less expected that the government knows best what kind of medicine you should have and what kind of schools are right for your children, and where the government collects taxes for the churches. This is crazy to the American mentality. On the other hand, the European culture is stronger in terms of thinking and education. And that is an important starting point for any human progress. It's a terrible generalization, but in my experience, the European has a more thoughtful individuality, and the American has a more fiery individuality and a stronger will to assert his independence.
Can you contemplate what would happen if a healthy threefold social organism does not manifest? What would be the consequences of this?
Then the beginnings of our individualization turn retrograde. We relapse into group identities, into reliance on central authority figures or authority groups, and ultimately human evolution misses its aim.
To bolster that aim, Steiner established the Waldorf pedagogy in the cultural sphere. I think, in fact, it's one of the few surviving institutions from his threefolding attempts. But I think this link to threefolding seems to have disappeared. The Waldorf movement has sort of renounced being part of threefolding, and ironically, its purpose was to boost the threefoldedness of children, who could then unleash social threefolding. What has happened to the Waldorf movement?
Yes, the Waldorf school was originally founded as a part of the threefold social organism, as a part of the movement to liberate the cultural life of the human spirit from the clutches of the government. And Rudolf Steiner emphasized again and again how critical it is that we battle at every step against government control of schools. And he did that in Stuttgart with his Waldorf school. In the meantime, the school movement has grown, and there's a wish to provide a healthy alternative schooling to as many children as possible. And there's a wish to secure the existence of these schools, very understandably. That means, if possible, accept government subsidies to secure the schools. This is far more the case in Europe than it is in America, where the government does not subsidize private schools. But even there, through tax exemptions, there is a hidden subsidy happening. That's the one side, let's say the external reason. However, it's unfair even to scold any of these Waldorf people for acting in that way, because they don't have the awareness of the relation of the Waldorf movement to the threefold social organism. And that is a weakness in the trainings. The Waldorf teacher trainings, as far as I know, are extraordinarily weak, with few exceptions, when it comes to anthroposophy. They want to make it possible for the schools to multiply. They want to turn out teachers with a practical ability in the classroom. They teach them recipes. The children should learn to knit. They should learn to do watercolor painting. They should learn Norse mythology in 4th grade. And these recipes are diligently or even more or less lovingly applied in the schools, but the spiritual substance dries out at the root when anthroposophy, as the science of the supersensory nature of the human being, is not cultivated per se. That, I think, is the deeper underlying cause of the phenomena you name.
Is that something that could be remedied by deepening teachers' exposure to anthroposophy?
Yes, that's the good news. At any given point, at any given moment, you could teach people who are interested in being taught about anthroposophy and let them develop a school out of that. Here and there are attempts to do so, and even the most imperfect attempts are always helpful.
Given that anthroposophy is somewhat compromised and declining in numbers, how do you see its goal unfolding, which from the temple legend lectures might have been to help the Freemasons carry spiritual science forward? How do you see this turning out?
The anthroposophical movement has the task of furthering our understanding of what man is and his relation to the world. Out of this, unlimited practical possibilities for work unfold. In schools, in medicine, in agriculture, in technology, in all of the arts, in the creation of new arts, in economics, in psychology, in self-education, in religion, astronomy, chemistry, biology, physics, mathematics, geometry, and every other field that there is. Those are the daughter movements. Anthroposophy itself is the mother of these daughters. This situation is analogous to the Waldorf situation. If the source dries up, the practical initiatives can roll on for a time by their own inertia, but they will be watered down or changed into something else in time. That's a significant issue. The anthroposophical movement needs to be strengthened, and if it cannot find a home in the anthroposophical society, or if it cannot unfold with sufficient intensity in the anthroposophical society, it needs to unfold elsewhere. We must not let it fall. The other side of it is, even the weakest efforts do pay off to some extent. And if the anthroposophical movement is not up to the task, and I wouldn't place my hopes especially in the Freemasonry that I'm aware of, then maybe the reality of threefold organizing has to be discovered by other people. It's a reality, and so it should be possible for anyone to discover it or to rediscover it. In America, where private schools are not funded by the government, there is a very long and more or less sacred tradition of providing scholarships to poor people so that the schools can be made available by gift money. And all of the better private schools and all of the better private universities have huge scholarship funds to make this possible. That's a tiny step toward the liberation of the spiritual life from the government. And that has happened independently of anthroposophy, which shows it's possible in principle. But anthroposophy would be extremely helpful because it makes us aware in a systematic and explicit way of certain things which otherwise are only tediously and slowly discovered.
It seems that the economic sphere infringes or hinders this progress. For example, in Europe, the Waldorf movement has yielded to unhealthy economic dependency on the state. In North America, to an equally unhealthy economic dependency on upper middle class families. Why is the economic sphere so detrimental in advancing the threefold organism?
There is a tendency in the industrialized nations for the economic life to dominate, for universities to adjust their goals of learning to provide skills that industry needs, for example, which can, of course, be a valid goal of education, but must not be the central or exclusive goal. And there's a tendency for the powerful financial lobbies to influence the life of rights as well. That seems to be predominant. It would be healthier if the cultural, spiritual life could dominate. Not in the sense of encroaching on the other spheres, that would be a situation like ideology, but in the sense of being fertile. Wherever the cultural spiritual realm is strengthened, there is hope for the others to come to their true goals. For example, if children are educated in a healthy way, they will grow up with an innate, strong feeling for the rights of others and with respect for the individuality of others and for the boundaries which prevent them from encroaching upon other people. That's simply something that you learn in early childhood and in your school years as well. The stronger the educational life is, the better that can happen. And where the education is not healthy, it's unreasonable to expect the people to have a feeling for the sanctity of human rights. That's why of the three spheres, the primary one, in the sense of the origin of the others, is the spiritual life. Likewise, there can be no economy if people do not learn things. You have to learn how to work the machines. You have to learn how to till the earth. You have to learn how to drive the trucks. That's actually the spiritual life, developing people's abilities. And you have to learn enough to be innovative and create new ways of serving humanity in the economic world. The goal of the economic life is to satisfy people's needs, bodily and spiritual needs. And that cannot happen without a healthy spiritual cultural realm. So wherever that is cultivated, the others can recover. And wherever the spiritual life is crippled or infringed upon or limited by the government or by the economy, the whole social organism suffers.
It seems to me that Steiner didn't cover the right sphere as much as the other two. Why would that be?
The sphere of culture, human learning, the sciences, education, the arts, religion, is enormously great and capable of unlimited further unfolding. The sphere of the economy, how to work, how to achieve practical goals, how to move goods to the right places in the right way or in helpful ways, is an unlimited sphere. The sphere of human rights is limited. We can say the spiritual cultural life is the heritage of our pre-birthly existence, our pre-birth existence, and goes back to ancient times, to our origin in the spiritual world. The entire past is enclosed within it. And if we master that, we can unfold the future out of it. The economic life appeals to our will to engage in work, and the entire future works through the economic life. The sphere of rights corresponds to our rhythmic system, our middle system, which is the area between the past and the future, which is the present. And that's a very small area. And in a healthy social organism, the powers of the government must be as small as ever they can. Rudolf Steiner termed himself an evolutionary anarchist in the sense that he wanted the government to have less and less scope and less power, as little as possible, but as much as necessary in order to protect human rights. He wasn't in favor of abolishing the government altogether, at least not yet. But it should, in a healthy sense, be very narrowly limited, because the sphere of rights is the sphere of coercion. It's the only place where people can rightfully say to one another, you must do this, or you must desist from doing that, and where people get locked up or prevented by force from doing certain things. It's a necessity, but one we don't want to bloat. And when governments bloat, we have unhealthy phenomena. I should add, however, Rudolf Steiner spoke a whole lot about a whole lot of things. And if you dig around in the lectures he gave on the Threefold Social Organism, you do find quite a lot about the sphere of rights. One fellow compiled a book in German of all the things Rudolf Steiner said about the sphere of rights, and it's quite a thick book. Nevertheless, it's not as much as he said about the other spheres.
Do you have any recommendations on how to make the social organism more apparent to young people? Well, it's always there, it's quite hidden, and it's very intangible right now.
I recommend that young people get together and learn together. It's so beautiful to learn things together, and truth that has been experienced in community sets the soul on fire. Young people come with every generation out of the spiritual world of our pre-birth existence with new and different awarenesses and capacities which previous generations completely lack. New things need to come into the world, and they cannot if the young people are only educated according to the preconceived patterns imposed by the previous generations. These older generations don't even do it with a conscious intention to suppress the youth. It's simply an unexamined preconception that this is the way we have to do things. And the young people could get together if they want to and decide for themselves what they want to learn and how they want to learn it and whom they want to learn it from, and invite those people. And they could spend maybe a few days or a few weeks together and live together and prepare food together and learn together. And maybe a part of the day could be learning, and a part of the day could be an artistic activity. And a part of the day could be practical work in the garden that also builds community in a wonderful way. Be it a garden or the construction of a building or some other type of work with your hands and limbs.
Given the variety of human conditions currently incarnated on Earth, would there be some more inclined to advance a healthy threefold social organism than others?
I'm not sure of the answer to that. It seems to me any human individuality incarnating on the earth has the hope of making progress in this direction. Therefore, there must be openings in the different parts of the world, in the different folk groups, in the different professions and trades for inner evolution. But where those are will probably vary greatly from one situation to another. I lack the overview to say how it is exactly. But there must be ways, wherever there are human beings, there must be ways and means to enhance the humanness.
How are these different groups to interact with each other if they're at different stages or circumstances?
There are always different evolutionary stages existing alongside one another. That makes the whole story so interesting. If you're more advanced in one respect, or if you think you're more advanced, you could leave the others behind so that they don't bog you down, and try to get together with other advanced people and evolve some more. Or you could say, I owe it to the others that I was put in the position I'm in today, and I want to help them. Or you could say, I think I'm especially advanced in this way, but maybe the others have qualities which I lack and I could even learn from them. A healthy humanity should be a cosmos of different abilities, but also a cosmos of different weaknesses and needs. In a school class, we notice, if all goes well, that the one is better at mathematics and the other is better at a foreign language, and another one is a better athlete. And that's healthy. People come with individual gifts.
We talked about not achieving the threefold social organism. Would this be reversible? If we don't achieve it, would there be a second or a third chance later? What will happen if a point of no return is reached?
I assume that the grace period cannot be indefinite. If we really reach the point where we consciously renounce our own humanness to such a degree that the social organism cannot and will not become healthy, the gods are going to have to come up with a new solution. Our whole planetary evolution will be a failure. That would be drastic. Usually things succeed partly, imperfectly.
Let's switch to technology. Can you speak of Ahriman's goal in it? What is he trying to capture from us through it?
He would like to capture the forces of thinking in the cosmos. The world exists out of a lawfulness. Ideas are at work unconsciously in nature. They become conscious in the human spirit because the cosmic thinking which underlies the world has been entrusted to us individually. Ahriman would like to get it into his clutches and create a cold light of intelligence, devoid of the human soul and devoid of the connection with the gods. He would like to have his own robotic world mechanism. He has to work toward this anti-divine and anti-human aim because he has a task in the world to oppose our humanness. If we are to become the spirits of freeness, which is our cosmic calling, then there has to be opposition. And the powers of Ahriman and Lucifer were appointed by the gods to oppose us so that we could develop our will more freely. That's why they're there. They have their rightful place in the cosmos. Ahriman gives us everything that is solid, everything that is formed, and that has its rightful place. It is where it develops in the wrong place that the illnesses of the body and of the soul begin to appear.
So then Lucifer's goal is to distract our souls?
Yes, to distract us from the needs of earthly humanity and from the suffering of creation, and to lure us into a pleasant world, into a bubble of subjective spiritualism, where the compassion and the attitude of serving are forgotten.
On to Steiner's mystery dramas. Strahler, the character who finds himself trying to fend off these two adversarial beings to achieve harmony, so he can invent machines that would be powered by his own will forces. Would a healthy threefold social organism be required to access these capacities at a social level? Is threefolding a prerequisite to access these things?
Strahler is an inventor and a physicist. He works with etheric energy, and his mechanism is designed to make energy freely available. He has a social intention in creating this device. He wants to create labor conditions for the proletariat that are dignified and worthy of a human existence. In the future, it will be possible to create such devices, according to Rudolf Steiner. However, there's a danger involved as well, because these forces can be misused for destructive or egotistical ends, or for the egotism of certain groups which also exist. There are occult circles which know about this technology and which are working to develop it if they have not done so already. It will be possible in the future to have a kind of machine that only works when a certain person is present. Whole factories will be set up which run very differently depending on who is directing the factory. A person will approach a machine, says Rudolf Steiner, and make a movement with his hand, and the second movement and the third movement, and the machine will start to run. This is dependent on the moral qualities of the person running the machine. And it should be possible to make machines which will only run when a good person runs them, and which just won't do anything when someone with ill intentions approaches them. An early example of such technology appeared in Philadelphia in the second half of the 19th century, when John Worrell Keely created a whole series of machines which wouldn't run for anyone else except him. And professors and engineers came from far and wide to test these things and to try to find out where the trick was. They couldn't find any trick. They never managed to expose the fraud. They were convinced he was a fraud. Rudolf Steiner says he wasn't a fraud, but it was something that he did instinctively, which he himself didn't fully understand. And that's an evolutionary necessity for our own protection, that this technology cannot be mass-marketed so far. In the mystery drama, Dr. Strader invents such a device, and it works in his workshop. But he can't mass-produce it, and he doesn't understand why.
So Strader is Keely, in a way, right?
In that sense, the two are comparable. There are other differences.
So an individuality could achieve the morality to develop such machines. But to take this further into a communal level, wouldn't threefolding be required?
Yes, but it's not an absolute requirement. It requires a degree of morality. This permits of degrees. It requires a foreman who is good or has good intentions. Or it requires a labor force which is perhaps not entirely saintly, but fundamentally decent. It depends on how the machines are set up. But it does require, like all technology, it requires us to advance in our own moral inner development. We forget this. But that's not only true of the future etheric moral technology.
For example?
Well, look at atomic energy. That's like giving someone a new toy or driving a car. Okay, most people don't intentionally misuse cars, but atomic energy, it's very tempting to use that to vaporize a whole city. You build the thing so that it'll set off a chain reaction, and it unleashes enormous powers of destruction. And one can really ask, when one looks around at our present-day politicians, whether they have the moral stature to deal with these devices in an appropriate way.
So an evolution of the group's morality is necessary. This would need to be nourished.
That needs to be nourished.
What would be the best way?
It's a question of education. Early childhood education. Healthy schools where children learn joy in all that is beautiful and good, reverence, gratitude, friendship, mutual respect, help. The more we can develop that, the more capable we'll be of dealing with technology. The other side, of course, is that it would be good to understand technology. Rudolf Steiner wanted the children to understand how the most modern machines are built. He wanted the students in the Waldorf school to know how to take apart an automobile and put it back together. He wanted us to understand all the devices in our environment, at least in principle, to know how they work.
Back to the economic sphere and to the topic of price formation. Phenomenologically, all transactions could be interpreted as being karmic relationships, money flowing or not, getting tangled or untangled. could the economy then be considered to be the science of karma, or at least where it's practiced? Did Steiner ever put it this way?
I'm not sure whether he said that explicitly, but it's implicit. The money marks an event. If it's purchase money, it marks a whole series of different types of labor which have gone into the production and distribution of an object. That puts the consumer into a real relationship with the producers and distributors. And that's a karmic connectedness. If it's loan money, it puts the debtor into an obligation, and it enables the debtor to create something, build something up which will be valuable for the community. There too, the karmic dimension is obvious. And if it's gift money, it liberates the recipient of the gift to do things without the compulsion of economic forces, to cultivate activities which will bear fruit in the long term. For instance, to enter into a training of some kind, or maybe to do fundamental research which has no short-term yields, but if all goes well, could have very beneficial long-term yields. Such long-term growth is most meaningfully financed by gift money, and that's a karma that works on a very low frequency but a very high amplitude. I may have said it before, but I'll say it again. The first thing is to master the ideas and to understand them. The more you understand them, the more easily you find how to make them work in a given situation.
And the right sphere is this narrow domain which we want to shrink?
I don't want to shrink rights, but I want to shrink the scope of government to protecting rights.
Which is feeling.
Yes.
So feeling has to be reduced.
No, the feelings have to be very strong, but the social manifestation of the feelings must not infringe on others.
So from the Trinity, thinking, feeling, and willing, feeling would need to be the least disrupted one. Be more active in the thinking and willing?
The three have to be in harmony. But my feelings are a very personal matter. Certainly not a matter for social compulsion. And when they do reach the point where they have to be compelled onto others, such as do not take other people's things, do not kill people, then we have to exert this compulsion very cautiously, because the powers involved in being able to compel people to do things can so easily be misused.
Thank you for coming to Canada.
Thank you, Sebastian.